Movements are taking place all over the country to raise the minimum wage for American workers. And while they're gaining momentum, corporations are still finding ways to cheat workers out of an honest day's pay. I have Michael Burg with me to explain how that's happening. Michael, your law firm has done an incredible job taking care of workers that have been the subject of wage theft. Most people don't even know what wage theft is. They just go to work every day. They assume that the employer is going to play right. They assume that they're going to play by the rules. And in the end, these people just have huge amounts of money stolen from them in different kinds of ways. Talk about this a little bit. How do you see the problem, first of all?
Well, first of all, the problem is bigger than most people realize. 95% of today's workers have some form of wage theft going on. And it's actually huge in terms of either they don't pay them the right amount, they don't pay them overtime. We've had some class actions, as has your firm, in which we go after wage and hour, where they're not paying them for they're not paying for overtime, they're not giving them the proper amount of time off work, the time preparing in the fast food industry. So it's a huge problem that people don't understand, that even if you raise the minimum wage, which a number of states have done, and we can talk more about that, you still have this problem of wage theft.
Well, we started seeing it early on. I think the first real wage theft kind of stories that I started seeing, Mike, was where they would tell an employee, go ahead and clock out, and oh, by the way, there's about 30 minutes worth of more work here, and would you go ahead and work another 30 minutes? And when you do the numbers on it, and the numbers are staggering, because this means that the average worker, and this is a staggering number, but the average worker who is subject to this kind of wage theft loses $1,400 a year in those types of things. Now, that's enough to pay for, if you're a minimum wage worker and you're basically just barely making rent payments or utility payments, you're hit for a lot of money there.
It's between 10 and 15%. And it starts at the lowest levels. The undocumented workers, we already know that they get hit because they don't get paid what they're supposed to. They don't even get paid minimum wage. And then it moves up to the fast food workers. Exactly what you're talking about. They say check out, but then they still have to close it down. They have to clean the grill. They have to do all those things. They don't pay them for that. And we see it in other industries where the setup time, they want them to set up before they clock in. In essence, they're stealing hours and stealing money from these people. And even in the states, you've seen a lot of red states this last election, Nebraska, South Dakota, Arkansas, where they raised the minimum wage. And while that may help a little bit, it doesn't stop the wage theft.
Mike, I saw a number one time, tell me if this is in the ballpark, that it was between $40 and $50 billion a year that corporations take from the average worker in wage theft. Is that a number that has been your experience?
It is. And when people realize the actual amount that is being stolen from the average worker, it goes back to the things we've talked about on this show many times, which is how do you get this worker, how do you protect that worker? Even when we bring class actions, even when our law firms go there, that's not enough, because 51% of the people who are having their wages stolen are afraid to even say anything because they're afraid of retaliation. They're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of basically having, being put out on the streets or being a troublemaker. And it goes back to what they've done to the unions in this country, because the unions should be the first line of defense to stop this kind of wage theft. But as we know and we've talked about, the unions have been basically destroyed in America.
Well, you did a story one time, I recall, and you said this is where employers want to go. Employers want to go to where right now there's 9 million people out of work, okay? I think 3 million have been out of work for more than 6 months. It's that serious. So what ends up happening is that's a perfect environment for an employer, because you have 10 people in line to line up for that greeter position at Wal Mart. So the greeter, once the greeter experiences wage theft, hell, they're not going to do anything about it. They're not going to complain about it. They're going to be silent about it. They're going to put up with it simply because they realize there's 9 people behind them that want that job. Now, how are communities dealing, or are they dealing with wage theft by organizing anything that deals with it in a structure?
Well, some places they have. In Seattle, for example, where they raised the minimum wage, they do have the without NELP, NELP, which is basically an enforcement division. Even these states where you raise the wages doesn't help unless you have enforcement, unless you have some teeth. We see that in all the areas we talk about, but somebody must be looking at and enforcing to make sure the wage theft doesn't exist. But we only have it in a few areas and only in a few places. So throughout most of the country, there is no enforcement, even when the wages have been raised.
So now we're in a situation, as you pointed out, that the American public realizes that people can't live on $7 an hour. They've got to have a minimum wage that means something. So you have them coming up. You have communities and states coming up with like, as you point out, Alaska, Arkansas, Nebraska, South Dakota. They're coming up with what they call floors, and they say, look, $15 an hour allows a person to live. Not only that, it allows that person to invest in the community. They can go out and they can buy a television, they can buy a new car, they can pay for food at the local grocer, and so it's good for our community. But without a serious enforcement, there's really nothing that happens. Which leads me to you, your law firm. With class actions in the past, a class action has allowed you at least to go after a corporation. Maybe it's a Wal Mart. Oh, I think both of our firms handled one of the biggest Walmart cases in the country. But the only way we could get to Walmart was to take discovery, to have people sitting on the other side of a table beating the hell out of them to get to the truth. And in the end, Walmart says, okay, we're going to have to comply. Do you see any other way to get to them? Because, I mean, the U.S. government's not doing anything to enforce this.
Well, that's the key. If you go to Denmark, they have a minimum wage of $20 an hour. It doesn't hurt their economy, like the people here keep saying it's going to hurt the economy. But here's the best part. Their enforcement, if they have a fast food company that's doing wage theft, they shut down all of the Burger Kings or all the McDonald's or all of the fast food chain. And you can't operate your business until you make sure that you're complying. That's the kind of teeth we need, but we're never going to get it here in this country because, as we know, these giant corporations are running everything. So all we can do is have people come forward, and then we try to protect them. And that takes a long time, as we know in the Wal Mart case. It took years and years and years and years. And you and I both know they're probably going back and doing the same thing or trying to figure a new way in which they're doing wage theft. So while we catch them and they pay money to the people who they've damaged,
they morph into something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They figure a new
Michael,
way.
how do you see the Supreme Court? We got about 30 seconds. How do you see the Supreme Court helping to make this any better for the worker? I mean, I can't even imagine anything more outrageous.
This Supreme Court has been, and their rulings have been more in favor of corporations than any other Supreme Court in the history of the United States. So I see very little chance that they're going to step up and help the workers. The workers themselves have to organize, and they have to speak out so people like you and I can help them by bringing action in court.
Well, and at the end of the day, I guess the best we can hope for is to be able to take them on in a civil case, hit them the only place they care about, that's the pocketbook, and hope that makes any difference. And I know you're out there doing that. Thank goodness you are, that we have law firms doing that throughout the country, because it is the only recourse. Michael Burg, thank you for joining me. As usual, it's a topic corporate media is not talking about. I'm glad we have the opportunity to talk about it.
Thank you, Mike.
That's it for this week's Ring of Fire, but you can keep up with us throughout the week online at ringofireradio.com or at Twitter at Ring of Fire Radio and on Facebook. I'm Mike Papantonio, and we'll see you next week right here on Ring of Fire.